How did one of the greatest cities in history rise and fall? What's the true story behind the Tower of Babel? And how does the biblical Babylon fit into it all? Let's explore this journey step by step. And as always, don't forget to subscribe. Babylon entered history relatively late for the region, around the turn of the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC. Before that, a small settlement had existed there since the late 4th millennium BC, but it wasn't of much importance. The name Babylon is the Greek form of the Akkadian word *Babalu*, meaning gate of God, which itself comes from an even older Sumerian term, *Kaadandjira*, also meaning gate of God. The first historical mention of Babylon appears during the decline of the Akkadian state under its last king, Shar-Kali-Shari, the great-grandson of Sargon the Great. At that point, Babylon was still just a small town with little political weight in Mesopotamia. After the Akkadian Empire collapsed, Babylon came under the rule of the 3rd dynasty of Ur and served as a provincial administrative center run by officials. The city's location, however, was remarkably favorable. It stood between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, at the crossroads of trade routes and irrigation canals, right on the boundary between Sumer in the south and Akkad in the north. This position gave it perfect conditions for future growth. Yet for centuries, Babylon remained overshadowed by older, stronger city-states. By the late 21st century BC, the 3rd dynasty of Ur collapsed after repeated attacks from Amorite tribes in the north and the Elamites in the south. In 2004 BC, the Elamite king Kandatu sacked Ur, and Mesopotamia entered a period of fragmentation. Independent city-states like Uruk, Larsa, Eshnunna, and Nippur competed fiercely for land, canals, and trade. In this turbulent climate, Babylon finally had a chance to rise. In 1894 BC, the Amorite leader Sumuabum seized power in the city, making Babylon politically independent. Though still weaker than rivals like Larsa or Uruk, Babylon managed to maintain its autonomy and slowly grew stronger, helped by an efficient administration inherited from earlier rulers and by its strategic position. Then, in 1792 BC, Hammurabi, the 6th king of the First Babylonian dynasty, ascended the throne. At the time, Babylon was just one of many Amorite city-states. Its position was stable but secondary. While Larsa held dominance in the south, Eshnunna and Meri were influential in the northeast, and Assyria was just beginning to rise in the north. Hammurabi inherited a solid bureaucracy and a strong economy, and early in his reign, he focused on strengthening the city. He restored irrigation systems, reorganized taxes, and stabilized his provinces, laying the groundwork for expansion. The real transformation came midway through his reign. In 1763 BC, Hammurabi defeated Larsa, taking control of Uruk and other key cities. In 1761 BC, he conquered Eshnunna, and soon after, he defeated Meri on the Middle Euphrates. With these victories, Babylon rose to dominate southern Mesopotamia and much of the north. Hammurabi's kingdom stretched from the Persian Gulf to the Middle Euphrates, controlling key farmland, trade routes, and cities. Under Hammurabi, Babylon became both the political and religious heart of the region. The city's patron god, Marduk, was elevated to the head of the Mesopotamian pantheon, and the king of Babylon was seen as Marduk's earthly representative, carrying out divine will. Babylonian society itself was highly structured. At the top were free citizens, nobles, landowners, merchants, and the military elite, who had full rights. Beneath them were the *Mushkinam*, landless people without full citizenship. They often rented land from the crown or temples and had fewer legal rights. At the very bottom were slaves, usually prisoners of war, debtors, or criminals, who had no rights at all and were treated as property. Families followed a patriarchal structure, with men holding authority. Women, especially of higher status, could own property, run businesses, and serve as priestesses, but they remained legally under male authority. Priests and priestesses tied to Marduk's cult held great influence, exempt from taxes and duties. Hammurabi's greatest legacy was his code of laws, carved into a black diorite stele and placed at the heart of Babylon. He declared that these laws were given to him by Marduk to establish justice, destroy the wicked, and protect the weak. The code addressed nearly every part of life: trade, farming, family, crime, and property disputes. But the laws were not equal. Punishments depended on social rank. A noble might pay a fine for an offense, while a commoner or slave could face far harsher penalties. Still, the code included protections for widows, orphans, and farmers, and reinforced the idea of royal power as divinely guided and above private interests. One of the most enduring myths tied to Babylon is that of temple prostitution. Ancient writers like Herodotus claimed that every woman in the city was required once in her life to offer herself to a stranger in the temple of Ishtar. Biblical authors later expanded on this idea, painting Babylon as a city of sin. Yet no archaeological evidence supports this practice. Instead, scholars believe that Herodotus either misunderstood or exaggerated local rituals. Symbolic fertility rites, dances, or ceremonies may have been misinterpreted as sexual acts. The myth, however, stuck and shaped Babylon's reputation for centuries. After Hammurabi's death in 1750 BC, his son Samsu-iluna inherited the throne, but he lacked his father's skill. Rebellions broke out in the south, and Assyria in the north grew stronger. Over time, Babylon weakened, and by 1595 BC, the Hittite king Mursili-I invaded, looting Babylon and killing its last Amorite king. Soon after, the Kassites took control, establishing the longest-lasting dynasty in Babylon's history. The Kassites ruled for more than 4 centuries. They adopted Babylonian culture, language, and religion, ensuring continuity. They rebuilt temples, restored Marduk's statue, and maintained diplomatic ties with Egypt, the Hittites, and Assyria. For a time, Babylon was one of the great powers of the Bronze Age. But by the 13th century BC, Assyria grew dominant. Babylon suffered invasions, and eventually, the Elamites struck the final blow in 1155 BC, capturing the city and taking away its gods. From then on, Babylon lived mostly under the shadow of Assyria. At times it was rebuilt and honored, at others destroyed. In 689 BC, King Sennacherib razed the city completely, flooding it with the Euphrates to erase it from history. Yet Babylon was too sacred to remain forgotten. Later Assyrian kings rebuilt it, and rebellions continued as Babylon fought for independence. In 626 BC, Nabopolassar, a Chaldean leader, successfully revolted and restored Babylon's independence. With his Median allies, he brought down the Assyrian Empire, capturing Nineveh in 612 BC. Babylon once again stood as the leading power of Mesopotamia. His son, Nebuchadnezzar II, took the throne in 605 BC. Under him, the Neo-Babylonian Empire reached its height. He expanded across the Levant, conquered Jerusalem, and carried out the Babylonian exile. At the same time, he transformed Babylon itself into the greatest city of its age. Nebuchadnezzar rebuilt the Esahila Temple of Marduk, expanded the massive ziggurat believed by many to be the inspiration for the Tower of Babel, and fortified the city with immense walls and gates. The Ishtar Gate, decorated with bright blue tiles and images of lions and bulls, stood as a symbol of Babylon's grandeur. He also built his great palace and, according to later tradition, the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Though historians still debate if they ever truly existed, Nebuchadnezzar's reign marked the peak of Babylon's power and glory, but it did not last. After his death, weak rulers and palace conspiracies destabilized the kingdom. Nabonidus eventually took the throne, promoting the moon god Marduk, angering priests and people alike. His long absence from Babylon weakened royal authority further. Meanwhile, Cyrus the Great of Persia was rising. In 539 BC, his army defeated Babylonian forces. The city surrendered without resistance, either through a diverted river or betrayal from within. Cyrus entered as a liberator, respecting Babylon's gods and traditions, and declared himself king. Thus, the Neo-Babylonian Empire ended after less than a century. Under Persian rule, Babylon remained important but no longer the empire center. Later, Alexander the Great captured the city and dreamed of making it the capital of his world empire, but he died there in 323 BC. Afterward, power shifted elsewhere, and Babylon steadily declined. Its temples fell silent, its canals dried up, and its fields turned to wilderness. By the 1st century BC, travelers described it as deserted ruins. By the 7th century AD, when the Arabs conquered Mesopotamia, Babylon was gone, its name surviving only in legend. And that is the story of Babylon, a city that rose from a small settlement to the heart of an empire, only to fade back into the sands of time. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you. We'd love it if you liked and subscribed. It really helps us keep creating new content every week. And if you'd like to support us further, consider joining us on Patreon or leaving a super thanks below. Every bit goes a long way. We'll see you next time.